One person has died in a fire that gutted dwellings at Nomzamo in Strand outside Cape Town earlier this morning. The fire swept through the Wakga Bicky informal settlement as flames were fanned by strong southeasterly winds. CPR was done on an adult male who had suffered smoke inhalation. However, he was declared deceased on the scene. No other injuries were reported and the scene was handed over to police. Several structures have been destroyed. The exact number will be confirmed by disaster risk management once a formal assessment is completed. Now, yesterday morning, a shack fire ripped through the Masiphumelele informal settlement near Fish Hoek, leaving over 400 people displaced. SABC News reporter Vanessa Poonah and video journalist Joshua Sharrock have more.
Numerous informal settlements across Cape Town have experienced absolute devastation over the past week. Today we found ourselves in the Wakga Bicky informal settlement in Nomzamo in Strand, where we know that over 60 structures have been destroyed and unfortunately one person died due to smoke inhalation. Of course, not the first fire. As a matter of fact, according to the Gift of the Givers Relief Organisation, they've been responding to fires every day for the last week. We also know that there's a massive fire that took place in Dunoon. And we're joined now by Ali Sablé. He is the regional coordinator for the Gift of the Givers here in Cape Town. Ali, you've had your work cut out for you and of course always extremely sad to see people losing their homes and their possessions. In this case, unfortunately, someone also lost their life.
We were just yesterday busy with the fire in Masiphumelele, and on our way to the warehouse to load humanitarian items for distribution to the other fires we assisted in the past, we received the first call from the Stoffland informal settlement in Dorens, where the Breda Valley informal settlement informed us that there's a fire occurring in the informal settlement. We just got the confirmation that 62 structures had burnt out, 260 people displaced. And at 3 a.m. this morning, we received calls from community leaders and community members of this informal settlement, the Wakga Bicky informal settlement, pleading for us to come assist them as the informal settlement is on fire. The fire department was on site to extinguish the blaze. The community members then informed us around about 7 o'clock that unfortunately one person has passed on due to smoke inhalation. We have teams stretched all over. After my distribution at this fire site, I'll be making my way to the Dorens area to assist the communities there. We have teams assisting in the Masiphumelele areas of the fire that has occurred yesterday. We have teams assisting 2 informal settlements in Dunoon, where a fire occurred last week. And then we have a team assisting in the Kosovo Philippi area as well to assist those families. As we know, it's Christmas tomorrow. It's going to be a very bleak Christmas. We will try to make it a joyful for the young ones. We will provide to all the affected families a hot meal, and there afterwards we'll have Father Christmas going around handing out toys to these kids, just to bring some joy into the tragedy they've experienced over the last few hours.
Ali, of course, we know that summertime in Cape Town is synonymous with extremely high temperatures as well as a very, very strong southeaster. I spoke to this yesterday in terms of the living conditions in informal settlements are far from ideal. They're not ideal. And often we see people making fires to cook or to keep warm, etc. But then these fires are left unattended. You've given some advice, perhaps just to reiterate what people can do and also to be aware that this is fire season in Cape Town.
That's correct, Vanessa. Especially this area, Wakga Bicky, Masiphumelele, is overpopulated and structures are built on top of each other. And with the southeasterly wind blowing in the evening, over experiences over the last few years, whether it was their community or whether it was their neighbours adjacent, they've seen that the devastation by leaving a gas stove unattended, by leaving a candle unattended, and it comes to a simple thing of negligence of not attending to the fire you have started, that you're not only destroying your home or your family, it's having a devastating effect on the whole community. Look, today, unfortunately, one person has passed on. So we're asking people, it's the 8th fire in 7 days in the Western Cape. I'm sure you can see the state of tragedy. We're close to 1,000 people are affected. So we're asking people just to be extra precaution, and when you are intoxicated, to not try to cook something or to light a candle, because you're not in the right state of mind to attend to that. We find many times the person fall asleep, and in the fire in Kosovo, we believe it was formed by an illegal connection, and when the sparks flew, with the wind spread it, unfortunately, many people have had to suffer this devastation of simple negligence.
Ali, thank you so much for your time. Of course, they're the coordinator for Humanitarian Relief Organisation, the Gift of the Givers. They have a truck out to my left-hand side, and of course they are at this very moment supplying hot meals and necessities, basic necessities, for the over 200 people that have been affected in this blaze. The second one we've covered since yesterday, but of course the eighth that the Gift of the Givers have responded to over the past week.
All right, now Cape Town Mayco member for Safety and Security, JP Smith, joins me now with more on the fire from Nomzamo in Strand outside Cape Town from earlier this morning. Good afternoon, Mr. Smith. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. What devastation on Christmas Eve. I mean, just yesterday we were reporting on the Masiphumelele fire, which left 160 structures damaged. Let's start, though, with Wakga Bicky and that fire. What is the very latest from there? Because we understand one person is deceased.
That reporting is correct, and the disaster management service now in the aftermath of the fire has been involved in the Nomzamo community as well as Masiphumelele to do a formal count of the number of structures, 82 structures in Masiphumelele and about 450 people, and 20-something structures in Nomzamo, and detailing the individual persons so that we can activate or relay that information to SASA, who is the formal relief agency responsible for then ensuring relief, and of course working with our city's enforcement services to try and keep the site safe, with the solid waste department, waste management to clear the site of debris so that people can reconstruct their homes, and with human settlements and province and national to supply relief materials, relief building kits for people to be able to rebuild, and then activating various entities in the case of Masiphumelele that included Islamic Relief and other organizations who then assist with supplying blankets, toiletries, bedding, clothing, and food, so usually about 7 days of meals, breakfast, lunch, and supper provided.
So you say 82 structures in Wakga Bicky or Nomzamo, and then it's obviously the 150 to 160 structures in Masiphumelele from yesterday. So that actually means more than, you're looking here, 82 when we say just in Wakga Bicky, that's 82 families that are displaced. You've just told me that SASA is the one that's formally going to be attending to the relief process. In what respect will they now be going in to document some of them, and the social grants will be paid out? How will they be assisting if we're saying that they're the formal agency that will be dealing with relief efforts?
So the city has a two-pronged approach to that. Aside from activating our own agencies where we can help with, like, clearing debris, reconnecting the water and electricity supply, which has been damaged in these cases, toilets that were destroyed, and electrical supply that was disrupted to the affected areas and adjacent areas, reinstating that urgently, which has been done in the case of Masiphumelele, for instance. We also activate the various relief agencies, including Gift of the Givers, and other relief agencies that we have formal agreements with, who then have their various sources of donations and supply donations and soft relief. And then, of course, liaising with the formal departments who are responsible for the building materials, in the case of the National Department of Human Settlements, assisted by the Provincial Department, and SASA, who we aid the process or expedite it by documenting everybody, surveying all the persons, and then handing that information to SASA so that they can make grant funding available for those individuals.
Does the grant funding become available even mid-month, or how will it work in this respect? Or it's just to ensure that they document it again? If they were actually beneficiaries to begin with, that come month end, they'll then be able to benefit?
No, my understanding is that the relief is immediately available as an assistance for them to procure food and other clothing and other relief items.
Okay. And then as for alternative accommodation, specifically now if we start with those from Nomzamo community, is there any alternative accommodation for now while perhaps they're assisted to get a bit of some of the stuff they would need to rebuild their structures?
So two responses to that. Firstly, most of the persons involved or affected do not want to move into any other accommodation. They will occasionally stay with neighbors or family, but people are nervous to leave their sites because the site where they stayed will be built upon by other people. And that brings me to the second point, and that is the problems created by the PI Act. So in the past, with the Prevention of Illegal Eviction and Unlawful Occupation of Land Act, before the manner in which the courts now interpret that, we were able to put people up in halls and otherwise. But now what happens is every time that is done, the hall becomes immediately unavailable. People refuse to leave, and we have fires that happened 4 or 5 years ago where those community halls are still occupied, and where other community structures and the communities are then denied the opportunity to use those for meetings, events, church, sport, and all manner of other recreation, seniors gatherings, etc. So unfortunately, because of how the PI Act limits us, and the rights it gives anybody who achieves occupancy, that has now made that impossible.
Because that was bringing me to my next question on the fact that realistically here, we're being euphemistic if we're calling them structures. These are shacks. If people are being assisted to rebuild shacks, it really is problematic, especially if government is coming on board, because at this point we need to talk about decent housing for these individuals, as opposed to saying people will come in and help you rebuild the shacks. But you're saying that it has been a difficult one for government to at least remove them and put them in better housing.
So I think the debate around the incredibly limited housing delivery ability of government is well documented. From a safety and security or disaster perspective, I'm not going to add any fresh perspectives on that. The challenges are well understood by everybody. The amount of funding made available by national government to local and provincial governments is woefully inadequate to achieve anything like the backlogs and need out there. So you're not going to achieve successful delivery on those problems and translate people who have been affected by fire into a formal structure during this process. The best we can do is help them rebuild their structure as quickly as possible, and that usually happens in 28 to 48 hours, where people will rebuild on the same site. We try and prevent them from using already burnt materials, as that sets the scene for future heightened fire risk. And we try and keep the structures in a blocked pattern. We try and reblock or restructure those so that there are service corridors that allows us to do fire response and water and electricity and waste removal delivery. Unfortunately, very often in this case, some communities members will work with you, but others have a vested interest in not working with you, expanding their footprint, taking up more space, building in whatever corridors we try and set aside. And of course, there's always the landlords, those people who own many structures and sublet those structures or rent them out to make an income. And they are usually assertively opposed to any attempt by government to rationalize or clean up the patterns and reblock these structures in a safer configuration.
JP, when we talk about the move to formal structures, it's not necessarily that this would be something that can happen within 48 hours, but the long-term program that eventually at some point, you even speak now of the landlords that would be hoarding or taking most of these, and then some of these individuals are paying them rent. You speak of the problems that are there. So this is merely the long-term program that at some point is government looking to eventually have them out of those structures, because yes, in the interim, they must be assisted to rebuild those specific structures. But the long-term program.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that the city speaks frequently and regularly about its progress on housing delivery, on our efforts to engage national government to make land available for housing delivery, on the progress with budget expenditure and the handing over of new title deeds and new housing units, such as is viable within the quite limited financial envelope of funding provided. But as long as you have informal settlements, you will have this problem. And as long as national legislation permits uncontrolled seizure or occupation of land, you're going to have badly planned, poorly laid out communities that are prone to fire, flooding, and high crime. So every land invasion guarantees a long period of misery for people, often on land that the city is not even able to purchase or build on. And those persons have no short-term or even medium-term solution for housing delivery. And that's why the entire regime around land occupancy and the PI Act is deeply problematic and is desperately in needed for review. And I think that's something local government across South Africa understands, which is why SALGA and many others have all been trying to engage national government about amending the PI Act to prevent uncontrolled occupancy or occupation of land in a way that then begets long-term disaster and misery for the persons who end up in those informal settlements.
I suppose it still warrants a broader debate on this whole conversation, but at the very least now what's comforting is that you are facilitating interim relief for those individuals that were affected by the two fires. Thank you very much for your time, JP. That's Cape Town Mayco member for Safety and Security, JP Smith, speaking to us there.